They walked briskly along the banks of the Seine, two souls on a mission. An old man comes into view and they catch his eye as he approaches. "Excusez-moi, monsieur, we seek something." The old man immediately nods his understanding. "I know what you are seeking, a sound that is so well hidden by the gods of music that it is beyond a secret. Indeed, it is known as the secret secret. But many of you have come before, they come and they go, moving in and out, but never finding that which they seek. Many have left as broken men, mere spirits of gamblers who lost their final game of blackjack and were left with nothing more than the devil's answer ringing in their ears, signalling their ruination. No, your quest is a folly. There is more chance of you finding flowers on the moon than hearing that sound in this city. Soon there will be a new day dawning, and I beseech you to leave." "Go back to somewhere that allows fate to smile upon you, for if you stay..." Suddenly he stops. The men wait in anticipation. "You know what? It is time. I've held this secret inside for so long, for too long. Tonight you will hear the sound. Now listen carefully. You must go where the moonshine hits the water and the invisible glow from the Mona Lisa's smile meet, where the echoes of the great masters bounce from the shadows of the Pompidou. Take what you hear in those echoes to the Pont Neuf and wait. There is a sky train that leaves from there when deserving souls gather, and it will take you high above this wondrous, electric city of light to the very zenith of our great iconic tower. There you will be met by a kindred spirit, and there you will hear the sound. With the echoes of the Grand Masters in their minds, they looked out across the nightscape from the very top of the city's most iconic landmark. A girl suddenly appears and smiles. You seek the sound. Her voice a combination of the warm feeling of destination and triumph. They nod in unison, mesmerized by her fragrant beauty. She smiles in return. Then I have not been waiting in vain. She raises her slender arm slowly and points at the night sky. The music you seek is somewhere out there. It is indeed somewhere in the night. Every summer is a summer of love in Paris, a city rich in romance. Indeed, not only does this place contain a rich tapestry of lovers' tales, of warm, heady nights strolling hand in hand along the slow-moving waters of the River Seine before that final moonlit embrace, in the foreground of the majestic reaches of the Eiffel Tower itself. This place is also a global icon of all that is great about the creativity and the artistic pursuit of humankind. There is art here. There is culture behind and in front of every step you take. And of course, there is music. The creation of music and the inspiration for music all gather here to form huge swathes of the soundtracks to our very lives. And this brings us in a roundabout way to the summer of 1982. A romantic tale of two aspiring creatives in pursuit of their one true love, music. When Thierry Noritop and Bernie Adams set off on their musical journey together as the French cult duo Stereo, it would be hard to imagine that either of them foresaw that a collaboration lasting over 3.5 decades would spawn just 2 albums, and that those 2 albums would indeed be separated by almost 30 years. Bernie Adams was already a recording artist, and Noritop himself was already a top musical talent. Here's how Thierry recalls meeting Bernie in those early days as Stereo was born.
I met Bernie Adams through a friend of mine to make demos, guitar voice on his own songs. Bernie is not a musician and does not play any instrument. My work on these demos was to find the right chords on his melodies, and then, later, we started writing stuff together. It gave Bernie's solo album in the early 80s, but the songs were a little too easy listening for me, too pop music. So I wanted to do something more related to what I loved. That's why I created Stereo, and then Bernie found the project very exciting.
And that was, of course, the great Thierry Noritop telling us about meeting Bernie and how the legend that is Stereo came about. Now we're going to have a listen to one of the Mercurial duo's early releases, way back from 1983, I think. This is No More.
The world is very
And that was, of course, No More from Stereo way back in 1983, a long time ago. And how can you not like that? Impossible to not like that. Fantastic track. Now, as any artist will tell you, recording a hit single, or indeed any single, is one thing. But recording an entire album, especially one with strength in depth, if you like, with a lot of very strong tunes, is an altogether different animal. It naturally takes a lot longer. Bad habits like obsessive tinkering with sounds and effects can often creep into the process. Musicians and personnel will often wish to take a break during recording due to the length of the time it can take, I suppose. Indeed, recording an album, especially your first as a new collective, can be a minefield, a much less than glamorous experience, if you like. Stereo released the first of their two albums, titled Assembly Line, in late 1985. Here's the genius, that is Thierry Noritop again, to tell us about the duo's first album creation.
After the underground success of Somewhere in the Night and No More, the first two singles, we found many partners to make an album. The recording is a great memory. We had a lot of fun, yeah. I really love Nowhere in the Island. It's probably one of the best songs I wrote for Stereo. Basically, I often start with a sentence like this. Nowhere in the island. Oh, fantastic. But he wrote a very beautiful and simple lyrics. But in fact, I never really found the right way to arrange the music for this song. But with the passing of time, I think I would have needed outside help. But I still like it. I also really love Moonshine, another song, which I wrote alone in the studio when I was waiting for the sound engineer and the pianist. It was very risky because we didn't have much time in the studio and because we didn't have much money. I was inspired. I hope. So Bernie came along and liked the music, found the melody, and then wrote the lyrics, a short text. I'm very proud of this song. Unfortunately, the album was a flop, a huge one. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't a flop with us. I mean, no money, waiting for the sound engineer and the pianist. That's a common thing in a recording studio. But still, they persisted and made the album. That was, of course, Thierry telling us, letting us in, if you like, on a few of his memories from recording Stereo's debut album, Assembly Line. We're going to hear another track now from the album. This is TV News. And that was TV News from Stereo's 1985 debut album Assembly Line. What a track. Love it, love it, love it. Now, sadly, as Thierry mentioned before in his comments about making the first album, the album, despite huge critical acclaim and a massive cult following, failed to achieve the heights that Thierry and Bernie were hoping for, and this signalled a sort of semi-decline in the duo's productivity together. Indeed, as a creative entity, their meetings became few and far between, leading many to believe it would be the last we would ever see of Stereo as a creative force. Sporadic releases followed without creating sort of many ripples in what was fast becoming an ever-decreasing pond. However, both men were working as almost entirely separate artists. There was never an official parting of the ways, and somewhere deep down, something still sort of existed between them. There was sort of unfinished business to be settled. And this unfinished business came about in the shape of a brand new album, almost 30 years after the release of the previous one. Now, a lot of bands take a break between albums, but frankly, 30 years between albums, that makes the Rolling Stones look prolific, doesn't it? Here's the wonderfully charming and hopefully well-rested after that length of break, Mr. Thierry Noritop, to explain how and why the album Back to Somewhere came about after so many years.
Veronika Waziska contacted me for a release of our 80s work on a label Minimal Wave Records. It was following a big buzz on the internet with Somewhere in the Night, so I contacted Bernie. We hadn't seen each other for about 25, 26 years. Just to tell him the good news, it was a fantastic news. We met again, and naturally we wanted to rewrite together, and it worked. I prepared the arrangements and programming at home. Then we went to Düsseldorf in Germany to record with Ralph Beck, an incredible producer and sound engineer. A fantastic guy, really. I love him. He knows it, yeah.
And that was Thierry, 30 years between each album, Noritop, telling us about Stereo's 2014 comeback album, Back to Somewhere. And I don't want to risk it taking 30 years between songs on this show, so let's press play before we catch the Stereo syndrome. This is Waiting in Vain. And that was, of course, Waiting in Vain from Stereo's long-awaited 2014 comeback album, Back to Somewhere. I mean, I think I'd have added the word eventually onto that album title. Anyway, despite the album being of a superb quality and receiving very favourable reviews, an immediate return to the studio for a third time was not on the cards for Thierry and Bernie. Although, if we're all still around in 30 years' time, you never know. There could be another one coming down the track. Anyway, within months of the album's release, the pair were once again working on solo projects and continued in that fashion until that glorious day when Mr. Noritop announced the arrival of Stereo's half-blood brother. A glorious new vibrant prince and prepared to take the throne. Don McLean famously sang about the day the music died, but for many, the music was born, or at least reborn, the day Stereo and Solo was unleashed upon an unsuspecting music world. Stereo and Solo may only be half-blood to Stereo, but the electricity running through its veins comes entirely from its creator, Thierry Noritop. Here's Thierry to tell us about the birth of Stereo and Solo and working on his own.
I've been thinking about it for so many years. It was while writing the music and lyrics for Skytrain, when I put my voice on the tape, it sounded good. Better than I thought when I was listening again a few days later. I played it to my friends and my partner. They thought it was very good. So I really started working seriously for 2 years, especially singing thousands of times to get the best out of my voice.
That was the father of Stereo and Solo, Thierry Noritop, telling us about how it all came about. And with that, it's time to hear what all this fuss is about. This is Electric City of Light from Stereo and Solo's brilliant debut album, Somewhere Out There. This is a VB Electronic Special. This is Stereo in Solo. Who else?
Just
You just can't get tired of listening to music like this. If you can, then maybe the gardening channel's for you. That was the rather excellent Electric City, a light from Stereo in Solo's brilliant 2018 album Somewhere Out There. Now, at the request of Mr. Noritop himself, and we don't turn down requests from Mr. Noritop, we're going to play a song by another artist in a moment, the Blue Nile, to be precise. But first, let's hear what the man who chose this artist to be played has to say about the Blue Nile, and in particular the song he's chosen.
I'm probably the biggest fan of the Blue Nile in the whole world. Yes. The Downtown Light is my favorite song of all time. I can even have tears at the end of the song. It's so beautiful, moving, and so human. Yeah. Last September in Glasgow, I met Paul Buchanan, the singer-songwriter, and P.G. Moore, the pianist. I had trouble finding my words and not saying too many stupid things because I was so moved. It was incredible for me to meet the boys. The Blue Nile made 4 quite remarkable albums. My favorite album is Peace at Last. It's a third album, just because Paul Buchanan has never sung with such emotion on this album. After almost 30 years, I've never tired of listening to Hats again and to the four albums. So, hats off Mr. Paul Joseph and Mr. Robert.
Now, before we move on to the next band that Thierry has requested, let's just remind ourselves of the brilliance of Thierry himself with another Stereo song. This is from their 2014 comeback album, Back to Somewhere, and this is Spirits.
Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step. Said it was collapsed too far, but that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
the brilliant Stereo there with Spirits from 2014. What's not to like about that? It's even got a ridiculously long ending. God, got everything. Now, the next one is a band that is easy to love, if for no other reason than their wonderfully quirky name. It's Prefab Sprout. And here to tell us about his love for them, and this song in particular, is your favourite Frenchman and mine, Thierry Noritop.
My second favourite band is Prefab Sprout. Singer-composer Paddy McAloon, for people who don't know the band, is, in my humble opinion, the best English songwriter, one of the finest one. In addition, Paddy McAloon said in an interview that Paul Buchanan of the Blue Nile was a genius, which made me happy. All Prefab Sprout albums are excellent, including the last one, Crimson Red. The song Nightingales is a marvel of song. The arrangements are so beautiful, and as a bonus, Stevie Wonder on the harmonica. What more could you ask for?
Now, any creative artist, however experienced or naturally talented, will always draw on influence of others that have gone before them, whether it's consciously or merely subliminally. And whether we like it or not, what we've heard in our lives will always manifest itself in some shape or form in that which we create ourselves. Despite the musical genius that he possesses, Thierry Noritop is no exception to this. Here's Thierry to tell us about what and who influences his creativity.
As a guitar player, I'm sorry in advance for my accent, for my French accent. First of all, Keith Richards. After, of course, Jimi Hendrix, Pete Townshend, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Adrian Belew, and many other guitarists. As composer-singer, David Bowie. I miss him so much. Oh, David Bowie. So it was... I miss the right word. I also love Neil Hannon of Divine Comedy, Joni Mitchell, the fantastic Joni Mitchell, Steely Dan, Sparkle Horse, Kate Bush. I love the Scottish band Deacon Blue, the Pet Shop Boys, the great David Sylvian, Peter Gabriel and Genesis, Portishead, and more and more. And I really love Bud Bacharach as a composer, as a songwriter. I'm sure it's my favorite with Paul Buchanan and Paddy McAloon. And of course, are not to mention the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Doors, the Who, and all the great pop artists. And in France, I love Alain Bashung and the band Magma. Is it enough?
I don't think he missed anyone out there. I think he's just given us a rundown of the entire history of pop and rock music there. That was, of course, the mercurial Mr. Noritop telling us about who rocks his boat when it comes to creativity. Let's have another song now, shall we? We're heading back in time again now as we revisit the 1984 stereo classic Moonshine. This is one of Mr. Thierry Noritop's favourites as well. Yours and mine, Thierry. love that song. Been swaying away like a madman in the studio here. So glad there's no webcams. And as I said, that was in fact Moonshine, which was the third track on Stereo's debut album, Assembly Line. We like that a lot. Now, staying in the same vein as musical influences, I think most artists have a sort of wish list in their heads, at least, of other artists that they admire and who they'd like to collaborate with. So we asked Thierry to name 3 artists of any era or genre that he'd like to do a musical collaboration with. It's not what you expect, but here's what he came up with.
Without making false modesty, I think I would lose as much of my ability to work with songwriters I admire. I wouldn't dare say, that's good, that's not good. You're going to have to work again on the beginning of the chorus or in the second verse. It's possible to me. In fact, to be serious, I would have liked to work with Propaganda. But please, next question.
The beautifully modest Thierry Noritop of Stereo and Solo there, talking us through his collaboration wish list, or not, as it were. I'm impressed. That shows a degree of modesty that most artists do not have. And seeing as this is a music show, I see no reason why we shouldn't play some music. We're off to 1984 with this Stereo classic, and this is one of Thierry's personal favourites. This is Nowhere in the Island. Oh, it's easy to see why that's one of Thierry Noritop's favourites. I think it might be one of my personal favourites too. The more I hear it, the more I like it. That was, of course, the classic Nowhere in the Island from 34 years ago, back in 1984. How old do you feel? And anyway, now we're going to shift on. The incredible strides made by humankind in the fields of technology have enriched many of our lives in many ways, but perhaps none more than the lives of musical creatives. Indeed, the advent of such incredible advances in recording and broadcasting technology and its affordable and availability, if you like, has transformed both the way we are able to create and record music, but also the way we listen to it, obviously. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Access to music of all kinds has never been easier, really, and this has resulted in a plethora of artists being able to get their music out there and build fan bases without the might of some sort of wealthy record company backing them. This is very evident in the independent music scene, with an abundance of top quality acts building huge followings without the need for a conventional record deal. This in itself brings more and more artists into the musical foreground, as unsigned artists inspire other aspiring artists into the arena. Here's what Thierry had to say about the influence and inspiration of other unsigned or non-mainstream artists on his own creations.
I really like the Delirium Trees. It's hard to say in English. I love Sombre Moon, Church of Trees, and my favorite one, The Color Theory with Brian Azar. I'm probably forgetting some nice things I heard on the radio stations. Sorry for that.
The wonderful Thierry there, talking about some of the unsigned artists who tickle his fancy, and some very fine choices he made there. A couple of them, at least, we feature on the BB show on a regular basis. So we agree on that, Thierry. We agree totally. Let's play a song and ready ourselves for fun question time, and the great Thierry Noritop's responses to our silly question. But let's first indulge in a couple of tracks from the great responder to silly questions himself. I'm talking about Thierry. First up, we're going to hear the original version of a song we heard at the top of the show. We're going to hear the 1982 version of Somewhere in the Night, and that's going to be followed by the epic 2014 track New Day Dawning. But first up, here it is. This is the 82 version of Somewhere in the Night. superb Somewhere in the Night, 1982. Now, as promised, New Day Dawning. The magnifique New Day Dawning from 2014. And of course, before that we heard the very original version of Somewhere in the Night from way back in 1982. Wow, love those tracks. Now, whilst we are very serious about music and creativity on the BB show, we never overlook the value of embracing the lighter things in life. Indeed, if you can't laugh about things occasionally and perhaps be a little silly along the way, life might just be a very drab and arduous experience. In fact, if you're a regular listener to any of my shows, you'll know I am an avid proponent of ridiculousness and remarks of a childish or crass nature. My saving grace in all of this is that I'm also the producer of the shows, because an independent producer would have fired me a long time ago, I can tell you that for nothing. Anyway, in the interest of maintaining the normal levels of ridiculousness, I asked Thierry a hypothetical question. If he suddenly became world famous overnight and along with it became ridiculously wealthy, what would he do in the first week of his newfound status and wealth? Here's what he said.
Wrong question. I'm already rich and famous, but just famous in my building in Paris. As I live and think music all the time, if I were rich, I would buy a lot of guitars and synthesizers. I would have a bigger apartment and I would travel to distant countries that I don't know yet. And maybe I would change woman every month. I'm kidding, sorry. In fact, I'm very faithful in love and friendship.
There you go. Non-conventional answers to questions there from Mr. Thierry Noritop. I love that answer. That's there's nothing I can really add to that. Enough said. But something I can tell you is that Stereo and Solo have a compilation of extended mixes of their best tracks, and it's out now and available for download this very day. And we've rather helpfully put a link on this show's Facebook post, the advert for that very EP. It's brilliant. We've got all the tracks here. We're going to be featuring all of the tracks over the course of time on the BB Electronic Show. Well, obviously, why would we not? And what's more, we're going to give you a little sneak preview of one of those tracks right now. This is the extended version of Secret Secret. This is the BB Electronic Stereo and Solo Special. the rather superb extended version of Secret Secret, which is available with a brilliant collection of other extended versions by simply clicking the link on this show's Facebook post. It's as easy as that. Why would you not? Click on it, watch the advert, and get downloading. It really is that simple. I now beg you to forgive my superfluous use of words, as this next section is about something that is so much more than just music, more than just a song. Now, as human beings, we sometimes see or experience tragic or horrific things or events that deeply move us, hurt us, and shock us to our very core. Indeed, human beings are capable of such atrocities that it is sometimes hard to retain faith in humanity. For most of us, these horrors happen many miles away, and we're able to distance ourselves a little emotionally whilst looking on from afar. But when these inhumane acts are being perpetrated right on your doorstep, in your own city, within earshot, well, it's probably not so easy to detach yourself from them. Indelible memories are etched forever. Parisians have to carry these memories around with them, and Thierry is very much one of those Parisians. On Friday the 13th of November 2015, a tragedy was unfolding in Paris, the likes of which had not been seen by Parisians since probably those fateful days of Nazi occupation during World War II, and indeed one that Parisians will never be able to forget. I am, of course, referring to what is now known as the Paris attacks, a series of coordinated terror attacks across the city, culminating in the unspeakable and senseless killing of civilians attending a rock concert at the Bataclan Theatre. These attacks had a profound effect on Parisians, and an enormous outpouring of grief, support and defiant anger followed. Some held candlelit vigils, some marched waving defiant banners, some simply grieved the senseless loss of life in dignified silence. The creative forces inside Thierry Noritop chose a different pathway for him to express his grief and ease his pain. Ease the pain of what he'd witnessed in his beloved city, right there in front of him. Here's Thierry explaining how that fateful night played out for him as a Parisian in the very heart of such tragedy.
What a bad memory. Horrible, awful, terrible. I was at home lazing around, watching a little bit of the football game on TV, while surfing the internet at the same time. So I followed the news live. I was worried because my son Kevin had gone out with friends. Obviously, didn't know in which part of Paris he was. I found him. He was on the Champs-Élysées, but he quickly went back home, not so far away from my flat. On TV, it was terrible. So many deaf people for nothing. At around 2 or 3 in the morning, I stopped watching TV. Sat down at my keyboards, looked for an ethereal sound on my synthesizer, and I pushed the button record and play. I improvised what became the instrumental track Friday Bloody Friday, that I put on somewhere out there as a bonus track. It's a bad memory.
And this is Friday Bloody Friday, dedicated to all of those who lost their lives on that fateful night. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, said the great Edmund Burke. And as far as I'm concerned, evil cannot be allowed to triumph, lest we be left with a world where compositions of beauty like Friday Bloody Friday would not be heard, and this will never do. And now we're off to explore some more hypotheses inside the mind of the great Thierry Noritop. Musicians can sometimes be overlooked as artists, with painters and sculptors taking centre stage, at least in the world of supposed highbrow art anyway. And frankly, I found this a little bit unfair all my life, actually. I for instance, cannot paint or sculpt to save my life, but I do recall seeing the Mona Lisa and the Venus de Milo for the first time, and the profound effect it had on me as a creative, albeit a bad one. Within hours, a rather dreadful but nevertheless heartfelt song had been written, extolling the sadness of the Mona Lisa's captivity for commercial purposes. A bit naive, it's a long time ago. That song never saw the light of day, thankfully, because it was dreadful, but the process of it, the inspiration, the way art inspired art in another form, got me thinking. And the truth is, most truly creative people have at least an interest in, if not a talent, for more than one art form. And that led me to the next question that I asked Thierry. I asked him what other art form he'd like to explore if he were no longer a musician. Here's what he had to say.
I've always been fascinated by art students, the ones you see in museums making sketches. I deeply love Francis Bacon. Some of his paintings upset me, really. Others not. I also like Pollock, Caillebotte, Caravaggio, Monet, not money, not pas argent, not money, Claude Monet, the French painter. I might like to start painting one day, but I need space at home and, above all, talent, because I drew badly.
And Thierry there, basically pointing out the difference between a world-famous French artist and cold hard cash, effectively. And talking other art forms, we think he'd be brilliant at whatever art form he turned his hand to, though. Though I have asked him to stay away from radio presenting, as that's the only way us lesser talented types can get involved in it all. Indeed, it is a safe haven for those living by the philosophy that if you can't actually do it, just talk about it instead. I've been getting away with it for years now. They'll catch up with me one day. Let's have a song, shall we? Off to 1990 now. Zappez la télé.
C'est des capitaines Troy qui marquent les paires de fesses et jouent les Wonder Boy. Dynamiquement vôtre, j'aime bien leur façon de faire. Amour incognito, paradis ou enfer. Zappez la télé, public ou privé. De New York à Boston dans mon vidéodrame, j'en fais vraiment des tonnes face à des drôles de dames. C'est vrai que j'ai pas l'air frais quand elle me crie je t'aime, cathodiquement ok, je suis accro à l'antenne. Yeah. Toutes ces sous-Hélènes qui me font de la peine, tous ces Mike Hammer qui me font des frayeurs. Sans des sous-Sweet Fallon, t'es si mignonne. Pour zapper la télé, faut surtout pas se priver. Yeah, yeah. Aïe 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 aïe. Aïe 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 aïe. Aïe aïe aïe. Bol de l'an 2000 ou simple super flic. J'écris les scénarios dans mes rêves en plastique. Traverser l'Atlantique au fond d'un canapé, c'est si beau l'Amérique dans les séries TV. Zapper la télé, public et privé. Toutes ces sous-Hélènes qui me font de la peine. la télé, faut surtout pas se priver. Yeah, yeah. Aïe 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 aïe. Aïe aïe aïe. Aïe aïe aïe. Tous ces sous-élèves qui me font de la peine, tous ces macarnats qui me font des frayeurs. Santé sous Sweet for Love, t'es si mignonne. Pour zapper la télé, faut surtout pas se priver. Mais toutes ces sous-élèves qui me font de la peine, tous ces macarnats qui me font des frayeurs. Toutes ces sous-élèves qui me font de la peine, tous ces macarnats qui me font des frayeurs. Toutes ces, toutes ces, toutes ces, toutes ces,
From all the way back in 1990 there, Zapper la Télé. You're listening to a BB Electronic Stereo in Solo special. What a track that is. I love that track. Been dancing around the studio like a madman. There you go. Now, on a personal level, I've been very taken by the lovely nature of almost all the artists that we feature on the BB show. I say almost, all of them probably, on the BB show. The levels of personal ego are virtually non-existent, and there is a generosity of spirit amongst many of the artists regarding each other's work that is truly heartwarming. Most have an excellent sense of humour, don't take themselves too seriously, but some of them stand out a little with their character and likeability and cyclopean talent. And Thierry Noritop certainly belongs in that category. Having become acquainted with Thierry over an extended period of time via the show and our mutual love of music, I found him to be a truly amiable person, charming, funny and vivacious, and in the nicest possible way, a little bit mad. That's probably why I connected with him, because I'm not right myself, am I? Let's face it. Which is, yeah, I've been accused of lacking normality, I've thought, on many occasions. Anyway, I'm not a fan of guesswork and conjecture, especially when the subject at hand is available for comment, as is Mr. Thierry Noritop. Here's what Thierry Noritop had to say about, well, Thierry Noritop.
It's a little difficult to talk about me without saying silly things. I was born and live in Paris. I'm 63 years old. I have a normal life, an ordinary life with friends and family. I have this precious chance, this privilege to live the life I wanted to live when I was young, when I discovered music, to continue to be creative, well, I hope so, and to be able to pay my rent without any problem. I'm a cinephile, so I go to see films 2 or 3 times a week, often go to museums to see exhibitions. I travel 3 or 4 times a year. I like cities. I'm an urban person, so I visit more cultural cities, or I go to see friends like a month ago in Glasgow. A real normal life, like most people. I don't feel any different from the others. I hope I didn't say too many silly things.
Thierry Noritop there on Thierry Noritop. And now we're off to explore the Stereo in Solo universe. All aboard the Skytrain! Can I just check your tickets, please? wonderfully chilled out Skytrain from Stereo in Solo's epic 2018 album Somewhere Out There. That takes me to another place every time I hear it. Now, with the end of the show coming into view, and with the thought of a world without Stereo in Solo about as appealing as a world without chocolate, I thought this might be a good opportunity to put our minds at ease and to make sure that one day in the near future we'll all be back here to do another Stereo in Solo special. Here's what Thierry had to say about the future of Stereo in Solo.
I've been working on the new album for a year now. It's going pretty well. I'm rather slow, and I throw a lot of things that I find a little weak or not very good or that don't suit my voice. But I have 3 almost finished songs that I'll soon mix. I think I'll be ready for the end of next year. I'm taking my time.
Yeah, you take your time, Thierry, because, 30 years in between an album. A little bit of time towards the end of next year, a couple of years. It's nothing, is it, by comparison? Anyway, the man behind the music there, the music we love, I should say, they're assuring us there's more to come, and we're glad to hear it. Anyway, I'm saddened to announce that the end of the show is nigh, but before we play out with our final song, we just got time for one last fun, but very devious question. I thought it'd be fun to put Mr. Noritop on the spot and ask him a question that would test his skills in both lying and diplomacy, or heaven forbid he tells the truth. Here's Thierry's response when we asked him who was the best radio presenter in the world.
Let me think about it. But it's you, Garth, with no doubt.
And Thierry there showing his levels of diplomacy are the very finest there. And in the interest of clarity, I'd just like to state that that was a fun question, not driven by my egotistical neediness, I don't have any, or self-promotion, I don't do that either. I'm fully aware that I'm not the best radio presenter around. Indeed, I'm not even the best presenter at the station. In fact, there's a cuddly monkey hanging on the window here, which we should post a photo of, really, that would give me a run for my money on the mic. I am the Ringo Starr of the radio world. I'm not even the best presenter on this show. Anyway, we've reached our final song, and we're going to play out with, obviously, with Flowers on the Moon. But before we do, I'd just like to thank the great Thierry Noritop for entrusting me with this production. Presenting somebody's work in this way is never an easy thing. It's quite a personal thing, and you always worry that you're not going to get it right or you're not going to do him justice. I hope I have. Hopefully I've done his career and his wonderful music justice, and hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be back again with another Stereo in Solo special. But finally, I'm going to let you in on a little chat I had with Thierry the other day. He asked what the BB in BB show stood for, and I jokingly made a suggestion, and it was a joke. I'm going to use that suggested meaning in my parting shot. Don't listen to Stereo in Solo because I said so. Just listen to it because it is simply BB music. And by that, I mean bloody brilliant. Here's Flowers on the Moon. Thanks for listening.